While the mainstream media sleeps on us, we know the truth, and that is that the Denver Broncos are going to be terrifying because everybody else is counting us out. And it's easy for me to say that the Broncos are going to be good from my basement lair where I'm just drilling threes all day, but I made it my mission to go out and find out what plugged in people who have forgotten more about football than I'll ever know actually think about the Denver Broncos. And to that end, I am so excited to bring on to the show Sarah Bettinger, who writes for Predominantly Orange, a website just for us Broncos fans, and each and every day he brings us straight fire on Locked On Broncos. Check both of those out, but let's let it breathe with Sarah Bettinger.
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. Love the show and excited to be here.
Yeah, dude. How you feeling about the Broncos training camp so far?
I've been really excited. I don't know. I'm sure I'm just like you in terms of like counting down the minutes until Sean Payton hits the mic after practice and just eager to hear what he says. Anytime you have a young roster like this, I think that it's more exciting because you want to hear. I know he said after Thursday's practice, he's like, "Hey, I don't want to kind of give every single day-to-day updates on guys, but it's hard not to be excited about the youth of this team, the progression of the youth, and kind of knowing like what are these guys progressing in. And so that's what gets me excited about this Broncos team is a lot of people are pessimistic when you're a young, unproven team. I tend to be more optimistic, like let's go forward with the future.
Totally, man. The ceiling feels really high. So looking at Sean Payton, we've seen all the offseason buzz, and you've seen different rankings come in. I think Colin Cowherd said he's the fourth best coach in the league, and then USA Today had a poll that said he's the 18th, and I saw one the other day that had him as the 20th best coach in the league. Where do you think the truth is? Where do you think Sean Payton falls when it comes to coaches in the league right now?
What's 18 plus 4 divided by 2? Somewhere around there, right? 11. So I would say to me he's like I don't know how you feel about this, but to me Sean Payton has proven himself to be one of the best coaches of my adult life, if not longer than that. I mean, since he took over the New Orleans Saints, he to me has always been a well, he's one of the gold standards in terms of wins and losses, in terms of getting to the playoffs. Like, I always find it funny that people have said, like, oh, he's only won one Super Bowl. Like, how many head coaches in the NFL right now have a Super Bowl win to their name? Or how many coaches have had only, what, 1, 2, 3 years now after last year with Denver of not having a top 10 offense? So to me, like, Sean has always been one of the gold standard coaches, like up there with, I mean, not necessarily Belichick, but you know what I'm saying? Like in terms of the end of the season, you can expect Sean Payton's teams to be there. That's how I've always perceived him. So, I mean, I would say saying that he's a top 10 coach is not a hot take. I know Colin Cowherd got flamed for putting him fourth, but I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL right now, and he's being paid accordingly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Like I think he has one Super Bowl, only one, right? But that was with one of the most laughable franchises when you look back to it. Like we were too young to even remember like how horrible the New Orleans Saints were. So that's a bigger deal for that than anywhere else, you know. So what do
Mm-hmm.
you think the Sean Payton hate stems from? Even like in Broncos country, I feel like there's some Broncos fans who don't like him. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? I mean, I know that the way that he is with the media rubs people wrong. And I think that shapes people's perspective when the media is saying things about Sean Payton and when he's become known for now Bounty Gate. It's kind of like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady and the Patriots with, deflating footballs or doing whatever else they did. It's like a lot of people just perceive them as cheaters as opposed to all-time greats. And I think that's with Sean Payton as well. It's like he's being defined by Bounty Gate by so many people. Like he's a dirty head coach, and he's that all of a sudden opens up this can of worms. Like he must be doing cutting corners in other areas. And I think a lot of people, I hate that they do this, but they say like, well, without Drew Brees, what really is Sean Payton? And it's like that to me is one of the dumbest statements of all time because he's had 2 years without Drew Brees, which was 2021 and now 2023. And with the combination of Russell Wilson, Trevor Simeon, Jameis Winston, Ian Book, and Taysom Hill, what is he? He's 17-17 as a head coach without Drew Brees. So it's like, how many people would be way worse off without their legendary core? How'd it go for Bill Belichick in New England? How'd it go for, anybody that was post Peyton Manning? So I just think that's such a weird, lame thing to me that people move the goalposts in order to paint guys in a certain way when the reality is he's been a lock for a top 10 offense. He's pretty much been a lock for either a division title or a playoff appearance. And he's been a lock in a lot of cases for the final four or final eight in the NFC. So I just think it's weird to me how people dislike him and hate him and paint him in these certain ways.
Preach, man. I'm totally feeling that same vibe, man. And Drew Brees even came out and was like, I wouldn't be Drew Brees without Sean Payton. So that definitely goes both ways, you know. What is your thought? Like, there's a lot of talk about what we're going to end up finishing this year. And you have people saying we're going to be one of the worst squads in the NFL. And then Sean Payton comes out and he does not hedge expectations whatsoever. He talked about how he's got two middle fingers that he's been reserving. Just yesterday, he said, we expect to compete, we expect to win. Do you think Sean Payton actually believes that the Denver Broncos are going to be able to push to the playoffs this year?
I do think he believes that because I think that he showed the same type of thing when he rolled with Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill and those guys in 2021 with New Orleans. Like that team won 9 games and they had injuries all throughout the season, and it wasn't just to the quarterback position. I mean, they were missing Kamara for a good amount of time that year, so I think he really does believe that. And I don't know if I think you have to have a certain level of that hubris as a head coach. I don't think it's a negative aspect that he would be confident in that. And I think that when you look at the Broncos last year, they were bottom 10 in the NFL all season in terms of pass plays that went for a first down.
Mm.
So you talk about trying to orchestrate any sort of consistency offensively, whether it's the pass game or the run game, and you can't throw the ball beyond the sticks consistently. I know Russell had 26 touchdown passes, and I don't mean to diminish that in any way, but how many of those touchdown passes were set up by defensive turnovers on the opponent's side of the field after the Broncos had just gone 3-and-out on offense? So that stuff is like, yes, it's opportunistic, but you can't be opportunistic over a 17 game season. You have to have a level of consistency, and the lack of passing game created a lack of running game, and it created a poor perception of the pass protection because Russ was holding onto the ball too much. So you change the quarterback. We saw at the end of last year, it wasn't much worse with Jarrett Stidham out there, quite frankly. I mean, and that's just the reality that people refuse to talk about, to admit. But Jarrett Stidham was ice cold. He hadn't played all year, came in and pretty much did the same thing for the offense that we had seen all season. So to me, if you have an upgrade at quarterback, or if you have an upgrade in consistency of the passing game, maybe more appropriately said, I think this team can absolutely make a push in 2024.
I'm right there. I think the Denver Broncos are going to shock the world. Do you think that last year we were pushing for the playoffs until the nightmare on Christmas Eve against the Patriots, right? And we all thought we're going to make that push all the way there. Do you think we are worse than last year, the same as last year, or better than last year?
I think they're better. I really do. I know that the loss of Justin Simmons hurts in the secondary. I know that, you're replacing Josie Jewell. You had a veteran quarterback in Russell Wilson. Now you're going young at the position and relatively inexperienced, especially by comparison. So there's a lot of changes there. But at the same time, like, how much better did the Broncos get on the defensive front this offseason? And I've been talking about this all the last 3-4 months. If the Broncos can get better on the D line, you raise the floor of the entire team, because when you control the line of scrimmage, eighth best in pass block win rate last year, third best in run block win rate last year, or vice versa. I can't remember which one it was, but top 10 in both. They were 30th defensively in pass rush win rate, 28th in run stop win rate. You upgrade that D line with John Franklin Myers, Malcolm Roach. Now you bring in Jonah Ellis. You get potentially Ioma Uwazurike back, which nobody's really talking about. We'll see what happens. He was supposed to start last year. I mean, Jonathan Harris wasn't the projected starter. He wasn't even supposed to make the team. And then Ioma got suspended. So you got so much better on the D line. And I think with the offensive line being as good as it was last season, you can win in the trenches week in and week out. If that happens, you're going to be in a lot of look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. They stink at quarterback last year and they win 10 games. Why? Because they win the line of scrimmage consistently. They can rush the passer. They can create opportunities for the offense. You can win with a young quarterback, even if that quarterback is struggling, because you have the ability to win in the trenches, which I think the Broncos are going to surprise a lot of people with their ability to do this season.
And you look at how much we've invested in our offensive line. Are you worried at all about the center position, and how do you think that battle ends up playing out? Who will be our starting center week 1?
Oddly enough, I don't feel worried about it at all. I don't know how you feel about this, because last year at this time, everybody was saying that Lloyd Cushenberry was going to get his starting job taken by Alex Forsyth or
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. And so the fact that we're now worried about losing Lloyd Cushenberry is ironic and funny, because I mean, who was he before last year? He was going to be let go or cut, or, he was going to get replaced anyway. And now it's like, oh man, he got a big money contract from the Titans. Well, why can't Zach Streif do what he did for Lloyd Cushenberry for Alex Forsyth or Luke Wattenberg, especially playing next to Ben Powers and Quinn Meinerz, right? I mean, those guys are elite at their position. So you have a center that's going to come in and benefit from all these aspects right away, not to mention a quarterback in Bo Nix, I think is going to be the starter, who gets rid of the ball extremely quickly. So, and if Forsyth is the guy, he's already got chemistry with Bo Nix. So that's even more helpful. So I don't feel worried about it at all, which is weird, because I mean, we're talking about a 5th round pick and a 7th round pick that are competing for that job.
Yeah, but I think you're so right. The guard play can mask that so much. Like if you and Cody were the two guards, like I could snap the ball, right? It can't be that hard. I just need two rock solid dudes next to me, and I'm ready to rock, I think.
I love it. I love it.
All right. So lots been said about the misinformation campaign around trying to make sure that Bo Nix fell to us. Some people are saying that's kind of like how I was in high school when like 5 girls turned me down for homecoming, and I like convinced myself that the 6th one who said yes was my number one all along. Where do you
Mm.
think Bo Nix actually was on Sean Payton's big draft board if we could have seen it before the draft happened?
I think that if I was able to look behind the curtain, I would be willing to bet that their quarterback order went Caleb Williams number 1, Jaden Daniels number 2, and Bo Nix number 3. I guarantee that's what it was, because the way Sean Payton recounts the story of leaving the Oregon Pro Day, leaving the private workout with Bo Nix, and the things that he's talked about in the past, like, he did say about Caleb Williams about a year and a half ago. He's like, I think that guy's going to cause the NFL to have to go to a lottery system in the draft, because he's that good. I think he thinks highly of him, and I think the Broncos may have been willing. Like, I think NFL teams in general really liked Jaden Daniels more than anybody's really leading on. We saw in HBO Hard Knocks, the Giants wanted to trade up for him. We know the Raiders wanted to trade up for him. I think the Broncos really liked him. I'm only basing that off a couple of things that I heard, but nothing substantial. But I do think they liked him. And so I think that certainly Bo was right behind those guys, because Drake May, you can see there's a lot of raw element to his game that the Patriots are finding out, and they're saying like, Jacoby Brissett, he's the starter, although Drake May could blow us away. And the same is true of JJ McCarthy with the Minnesota Vikings, where they're saying Sam Darnold is far and away the starter this year. So I think the NFL readiness, the experience, everything that you look at Bill Parcells' recipe of what a college quarterback should have coming out, that we know Sean Payton abides by, I believe he's being 100% genuine when he says they came away blown away from his pro day, blown away from his private workout, blown away from what he did on the whiteboard, all these different things. I would be shocked if he wasn't the 3rd quarterback on their board.
Yeah, I'm right there, and I just saw on Twitter today that it looks like JJ's even like taking third team reps with the Vikings today. So
Wow.
I don't think that was ever his guy, and I think he intentionally tried to make everyone think JJ was his guy. He chooses his words so carefully, and
Yeah.
so him
Yeah.
coming out at that league meeting press conference and being like, "Oh, we spent 8 hours with JJ." He doesn't tell us that unless it's to try to make us think that he wants JJ, and I think that's great.
Exactly.
So here's a hypothetical. Space Jam 3 now is coming out. It's with Sean Payton, and the future of the planet depends on winning this game, and it's a football game instead of a basketball game. Sean Payton has to choose. The fate of the planet lies on winning this game. Bo Nix or Russell Wilson to win one game. Who do you think Sean Payton picks?
Man, I think we've got the proof in the pudding right now, right? He was willing to let go of Russell to the tune of 85 million in dead cap to pick somebody else. So I think he would choose Bo Nix. I don't think I believe that Russell's inability to run the offense deteriorated that trust to a point that last year we saw. I believe the turning point was the Houston Texans game, and I think we saw that Sean lost all trust for him in that game when the Broncos went 0 for 13 on third downs, and Russell threw that interception on 3rd and goal from the 6-yard line. And I think that was where Sean was like, I'm over it, because we heard him come out after that game and he was coming to bat for Jerry Jeudy and talk about how open Jerry Jeudy is. And I mean, just the way that you saw that trust deteriorate and people getting upset with Sean over yelling at Russell on the sideline. It's like those moments are frustration, because you are doing everything that you possibly can to set a guy up for success. You have receivers running wide open down the field and the guy's not seeing it. And how frustrating would that be as a coach? You're like, I'm giving you everything you need to do what you got to do out here, and you're not doing it. You're dancing around in the pocket. You're running away from guys who aren't even there. So I do think in the Space Jam 3, and I hope that Sean Payton's not the head coach on Moron Mountain at that point, but I think in a Space Jam 3, we're talking Bo Nix is the guy over Russell Wilson.
Yeah, man, I am too. And that game, that play, especially that third down interception, like he didn't even call the play right. And I think that was one where Cortland Sutton's like standing on the line of scrimmage and didn't even go out for a route because he didn't even know what it was. And oh, that was one of the low points for the season for me last year, for sure.
Brutal. That was brutal. That was when the playoffs were effectively lost for the year.
Yeah, man, 100%. So multiple times in this offseason, we've heard Sean Payton talk about how the competition is obviously internal and like you're competing for this 53, but then he's made mention of, but you're also competing against all the cuts that happened because of the 53. And he mentioned the kicker situation they had in New Orleans a couple of years ago, where he was like, going into camp, we were choosing between kicker A and kicker B. And then all of a sudden we chose kicker C, Will Lutz, off of another team that he got cut. So what position group could you see the Denver Broncos adding as cuts across other teams happen?
That's a good one, because as you look at this roster right now, you would probably say the two weakest spots on paper is probably tight end and inside linebacker potentially. But I think when you're talking about guys that get cut from other teams, it could really be, it may not always line up with your weakest position, because it may be that somebody hits waivers that you're like, oh wow, I didn't expect them to throw that guy on there. We have to put in a claim. Where the Broncos right now are pretty, I mean, they're decently high on the waiver priority order. They were 12th in the draft, so they're 12th in waivers. I think that it would have to be somebody that's good enough to say, all right, we have to compromise at, let's say edge. If somebody gets cut off the edge and we want to claim him off waivers, we're willing to cut Dondre Tillman or Thomas Incoom or something like that. But to me, I would say inside linebacker is one of those spots where you could see, because they just recently signed Andre Smith, right, after the tryout. And so if you just recently signed somebody at a position group, or if you have a weak perception at that position, like tight end, I could see the Broncos being active, and a number of teams maybe being active at those two positions, because you got to have those guys to play special teams now with the way that this new kickoff format is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about that. Who do you think? I mean, Mims obviously made the Pro Bowl last year as a kick returner. The kick return rule changes this year, and there's talks that it's going to be a different type of receiver taking those kicks back. Who would you pick right now as our kick returners? Who do you think will end up fielding the ball back there?
I love the idea of Marvin Mims being back there. I love the idea of getting Jalen Virgil back there again, because of what we saw from him at Appalachian State. I mean, that was what he was really great at. They didn't throw him the ball as much as you would see some of these other guys coming out at the college level now, but when he got the opportunity to return kicks, like, he was outstanding. I think he averaged over 30 yards a return in college. So he's very good at that. Tremont Smith is one of the rare guys who has taken one back in recent years. I think he's going to be a factor. I've heard he's already returning punts as well at training camp. So we'll see kind of what happens with him. But I think Tremont Smith is another potential game changer in that phase. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that really stands out potentially. I think those three guys to me would be the ones that, if you say, like Robert Saleh, I heard Robert Saleh say that he thinks teams are going to get upwards of 100 opportunities each to return kicks this year. And if that's the case, you're talking about somebody who's going to get a minimum of 25 to 40 touches, because they can kick it either direction. So if I had to project somebody to get 40 plus touches this year, I would say I would want it to be one of those three guys out of anybody on this roster.
Yeah, there's been a little chatter on Twitter about Blake Watson, the
Mm-hmm.
unsigned. But he's having some injury issues, and then who's the rugby guy we have, the tight end? Is it Yasmin or
Oh,
something like that?
Yasmin, yeah,
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 who's maybe
that would be
done that
interesting.
type of. It is kind of like a rugby play or something Australian. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
about that. What I think it's been a fantastic offseason for the Broncos, and unless you're a diehard, you've probably missed some of our great moves, and that's why national media is picking us to win 4 games because they don't cover the team like we do. What's been your like sneakiest good move you think we've made this offseason?
I don't think people are talking enough about the John Franklin Myers pickup. I know I've heard you talk about it on your show quite a bit, which is great. I think that he's one of those guys that's just he's so consistent when it comes to creating pressure from the interior defensive line. I don't think enough people talk about that move, and I think honestly, Brandon Jones is one of those that even Broncos country sleeping on because of the fact that he's replacing Justin Simmons. I think he was 12th on Pro Football Focus list of safeties last year, and Justin was down the list further, which, I mean, Pro Football Focus, not the end all be all. I get it. Not everybody takes what they say as gospel, especially their grades, but I think it's interesting at the very least to note that he was so substantially high on their list in terms of efficiency per snap. And he's a guy that can play in the box, he can play deep. I think he's an underrated pickup and somebody who's kind of like I've mentioned this to Cody, kind of reminds me of the Darian Stewart pickup a few years back where I mean he was kind of playing a backup role but a semi-starter role for the Ravens, and it was like, is he good enough to be a starter, is he not? And all of a sudden he gets this opportunity in Denver and was amazing in that defense. And so I think Brandon Jones is in a similar spot to where yeah, the Dolphins had some good safeties for preventing him from playing 1,000 snaps, but if he can get that role somewhere else, he could really excel. And I think that's going to happen now that he's in Denver.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like we've also added so many like positions to the front office that no one really talks about that will have benefits for years to come. Obviously, getting one of the best college football coaches ever out of Stanford, getting some of Sean Payton's friends from New Orleans. Like I think we've just had a way better offseason than anyone wants to give us credit for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, getting David Shaw is kind of crazy, especially they just interviewed him for head coach last year.
I
And
know.
I love that pickup because the guy has evaluated the roster and given you a vision for what he sees. Like how can you get this team back to the Super Bowl? He's already given the entire franchise that vision, and now he's going to be able to be part of executing it. And the fact that he liked enough what Sean Payton did last year, like people who think the Broncos are on a poor trajectory, just think about the fact that David Shaw interviewed for head coach last year, saw what they did over the course of a year, and decided anyway to join the mix and be part of that. I think that's a huge endorsement for the direction this team is going.
Oh, he could be at any spot in the league, and he chose Denver. I think part of that's being with the richest owner in sports, but I think that's such a testament to his belief in this team and this ownership group for sure. And I
Mm-hmm.
also think like him working with Harbaugh all those years will give us like a interesting insight to game planning and roster building if Harbaugh is
Yeah.
gonna be there for a long time. You tweeted this the other day. And I was just insanely curious and had my own opinions here. But it was a quote that Sean Payton had in one of his press conferences about like what's different this year about last year, and he was saying one thing that's really different is he has a better understanding of personnel. At this moment last year, we had a spring of non-padded practice, so we had less information on certain players. If there was more information at the moment, then certain decisions would have been made differently. What do you think he was referring to when he was talking about like what is that more information he wished he had this time last year and what would have been different?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm eager to hear your take on it as well because I think the thing that a lot of people want to do is say immediately, well, it's Russell Wilson. But I think to me, it was the mistakes they made with trusting Randy Gregory
Yes.
and Frank Clark and
Yep.
players like that, that they set the team back and they embarrassed the team. They, those guys aren't, I was just talking about this on my stream that I did for Bleacher Report recently, where those guys aren't on any team right now. Randy Gregory didn't show up. Frank Clark's not on a roster. Jonathan Harris probably not going to make the Miami Dolphins. Like I know those are different situations, all isolated, but those are, to me, are the guys that's like, if you had more time with them to spend with them and evaluate them as people, there's a reason why Randy and Frank were playing into the fourth quarter of preseason games last year. And we saw that come to fruition with early departures. And the funny thing is that everybody's saying, well, Frank Clark got out of the mess in Denver. And I always thought that was funny. Like, Frank Clark got his way out of Denver. He even gave him back some of his money. And it's like, you obviously, to prove your point that people don't pay attention, I think that's a case in point right there, is the Frank Clark situation. So I think that could be who he's talking about, but I'm eager to hear what your take is too.
No, that was and Frank Clark was the mess in Denver, and it was like when the 70 burger we let the Miami Dolphins drop on us. You've basically heard Vance Joseph say like that was because of them not being willing tacklers, and I that was the first thing I thought reading that, and I'm like, I bet everyone's going to think that's about Russ, but I think he is referring specifically to those players for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely love that. Let's say you and I are talking again in January. We'll talk way before that, I'm sure. The Broncos are pushing and they're in the playoffs. The Denver Broncos are in the playoffs this year because fill in the blank.
Because Bo Nix, I think I think that's the baseline. If Bo plays well, I think he's the reason. And I would say Sean Payton in addition to that, because you have to have the right coach quarterback, especially when it's a young quarterback. But I do think that Bo presents the biggest opportunity for this team to take a leap, just because he gets rid of the ball quickly. How many drives last year could have been different if the Broncos didn't take unnecessary sacks? How many one-score games could they have won over the last 2 years if they didn't get sacked out of field goal range? I just think that with Bo playing this position, I'm trying not to get my I don't want to say, oh, he's going to go out there and be this year's version of CJ Stroud, or he's going to be, the best rookie quarterback in the league. But at the same time, like, I do think he has the ability to substantially improve the offense enough that this team could be better than the 8-win team from last year, because that's easy to forget it. I know people don't like to equate those two things and say, well, you can't just say they were 8-win team last year, so they're obviously going to be a 9-win team this year. But to me, I'm like, why can't you say that? If the offense is even marginally better, if the defense isn't historically bad, why can't they be better than 8 wins last year? And I think a lot of that is going to have to do with Bo Nix.
Yep, that's exactly my thoughts. Like, yeah, we were an 8-win team last year, and you and I both agree that we are a better team this year, where the Raiders are substantially worse. The Chargers are lost all their playmakers, and it's going to take time to build a Harbaugh system. So if Bo Nix is the fix, then we are in the playoffs, and that's no doubt. One of the worst things in life is like when you see an awesome tweet and you don't remember to save it and then you can never find it again. But someone had this tweet about like how much lower your chances of ending a drive in a touchdown are even with one sack. And it was something like one sack reduces your chance of scoring a touchdown in that drive by like 40%. And it's just,
Man.
we know Bo Nix is going to get rid of the ball. He was one of the least sacked quarterbacks in college football, and that's going to translate, and it's going to lead to some wins for the Broncos for sure.
Yeah, that's
What
I think. Yeah, go ahead. No,
what
you're
week
right.
do you think Bo Nix ends up being the starter for this team? Do you think he's week 1, week 6?
I think week 1, I don't know 100%. I mean, I feel like this quarterback competition is all about getting from point A to point B, and point B is Bo Nix as the starter. So how quickly can they get there, and how much better does Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson have to be to justify keeping Nix on the bench? Because the less time he's out there in the regular season, to me, is time wasted. If you're just planning on putting him out there in week 4, I mean, it's a waste of time to me to say, all right, well, we're going to wait to put him out there until week 4, until the team's 1-2 or 1-3 or whatever it may be. I don't like that idea of him coming into a mess. I don't like the idea of saying, all right, well, the team's kind of down and out right now, we might as well get to evaluation mode. It's like, if you're unless Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson is like worlds better, and you say this guy's going to take us to the playoffs, you have to put Bo Nix out there against Seattle.
Yeah, that's got to be such a hard thing for Sean, because I'm sure week 1, even if it's only like a 5% boost, like you have a 5% better chance of beating Seattle with a guy who's lit up the league at times in Jarrett Stidham. But it's not about winning now, it's about winning from now on, but you also don't want to start this season with a loss. But man, I am hoping that Bo Nix is the starter week 1 because I got his jersey in white and orange thanks to the tweet you put out for
Dude,
NFL Shop. So keep throwing those out there, man.
let's go.
Uh, who do you think the most impactful rookie is going to be? I love the draft, and I think that's why George Payton is still around because he's an amazing evaluator of talent. And Audric Estime, Jonah Ellis, Franklin, we got some dudes. Like, who do you think is going to be our most impactful rookie this year?
I think outside of Bo Nix, I think it's going to be Audric Estime. I really do. I don't know exactly how the running back rotation is going to shake out. I've kind of started coming back around on Javonte Williams after his bad year last year. And we know Jaleel McLaughlin is going to have a big role in the offense, but I just think Estime is one of those guys that's like, you got to close out a game. Nobody wants to see that guy coming at them at the second and third level of the deep. I mean, over 900 yards after contact at Notre Dame last season, and he hit 21 miles per hour on the GPS against Louisville. Like, I mean, he's a freak physically, and he's going to bowl people over. And with those fresh legs coming in, that power, he provides more to the running game than does Samaje Perine, who barely carried the ball 50 times last year. I know Samaje brings his own value as a receiver and being able to get past the sticks, when he's throwing the ball short of the sticks, like we saw a lot of times. But to me, Estime is a huge impact player, whether it's goal line situations, whether he's a drive starter, whether he's helping you close out the game. I don't know that he's going to have over 1,000 yards or anything, but I think he's going to make some really impactful carries over the course of the year.
Love that, man. All right, we'll let you run on this. Where you've made me like a way, 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 way more informed Broncos fan. Where can our viewers go to learn more from you?
No, I appreciate that. I really do. And I love getting to do this. I've been over at predominantlyorange.com for a really long time, as you know, especially during the season, during camp. I'll always be on Twitter at Sarah Bettinger and Locked On Broncos as well. I feel like we're blessed to be able to do what we do, to get to cover the Broncos, to get to talk about the team and to talk about it with all the rest of the fans. I mean, it's such a great shared experience. And I think it's really cool how this has all evolved. So that's where you can find me all throughout the season.
Sweet, man. All right, well, you got a Bo Leave right here. Let's see it. Bo
That's
Leave,
right.
baby.
That's right. That's right. We both leave. I don't have a basketball hoop though.
You would have swished it just like me,
I
man.
would. I would have.
Love it.